right, welcome everyone. I think we're good to go. My name is Jaime Casap. I'm part of the Google for Education team. I'm the global education evangelist. I am joined here today by Esther Wojcicki, who is I want to make sure I get her title right. She's the founder of the Media Arts Center at Palo Alto High School, and she's also the vice chair of Creative Commons.
Yes.
Esther and I have known each other since 2006, 2007, when you first were involved in what we were doing at Google for Education. So I want to start with that. Talk a little bit about the beginning when we just kicked off Google for Education stuff, right? Whether it was Google Apps for Education or some of the tools that we were using. Your involvement with that was critical because we look where we are today, right? We have 40 million users using Google Apps. You were involved with that at the beginning. You've been involved with what we've been doing in education for a long time. Talk a little bit about that history.
Yes, I was really excited to be here today, first of all, because I've been around Google for a long time. As a matter of fact, since Google was a baby in Susan's garage.
Right.
And in 2006, what it was is that it was just a team, a Google for Education team. It consisted of Kristen Fridella and me.
Right.
And so what we tried to do is figure out, like, what are we going to do to get more teachers involved? And since being a teacher, I thought, I have some ideas. And I went around the country and put up these panels, got panels, New York, Chicago, got teachers, brought them in, and then tried to figure out what would be the best thing to do. And then we started all the Google apps, basically, So I actually was really lucky. I got to pick what I thought would be a good app for teachers.
Right.
Yeah, only thing that got removed was iGoogle, got slammed.
Yes. And we got a lot of backlash for that at the time, so we won't go there.
No.
So let's talk. You've been a teacher for 30 plus years now.
Yes, long time.
A long time, and you're teaching students at Palo Alto High School. You've just opened up last year, right? The Media Center at Palo Alto High. Talk a little bit about what you do at Palo Alto. Talk a little bit about your experience as a teacher there, and then I want to show some slides of the new Media Center. But first, kind of tee it up with your experiences as a teacher at Palo Alto, how things have changed over those last 30 years.
Okay, so when I first came to Palo Alto High School, there was one small class of students. There were 19 kids in the program. We had a typewriter. And the kids used to write their stories up, and then they would type them up on a typewriter. Then I used to hand out in class single-edged razor blades to everybody. And they would cut their story out and then paste it up on a pasteboard with hot wax. This was the way it was. And then I always got really mad because I would say, it's crooked. Got to get this thing straight. And after 3 years of doing that, which was quite a challenge actually, the program had grown, and I heard about these things called computers. And
right.
I was like, oh my God, something has to be better than this typewriter. And so that's the beginning of what happened with the computer. I actually discovered a Mac in Los Altos in a small store, and I applied for a grant in the state of California, and they told me, oh, you'll never get it. You have like no idea how to use this device. And I agreed, I didn't have any idea.
Right.
But I gutsy, I applied anyway. And somehow or other the state got, I don't know, somebody made a mistake and sent them to me. And I got 7 of them, and I didn't really know how to use them at all. And so then they were in the back of the room, all boxed nicely, and I had to confess to my students that I had no clue what I was doing. And actually that was the beginning of my collaborative teaching method, because all my students got super excited about this. They showed up after school, evening, weekends, and we figured out how to work them together. And I never even knew what the word network was, but they showed me how to do it. We did it all together. So then for 30 years, I probably shouldn't give too much detail on this, but 30 years I was in a portable.
Right, I've been in that portable.
I know. Portable, otherwise known as a trailer, was supposed to be a temporary building.
Right.
And then the program kept growing. Everybody was like, "What is she doing in that class? Giving out pizza or something?" And Actually, the truth is I was giving out some pizza.
Right.
But there was more to it than that. It was, so it grew and grew and grew, and pretty soon I was in multiple portables at the same time. Kind of interesting that the school thought that I could supervise multiple classrooms at the same time from one location.
How many students are we talking about at this point here?
Oh, at this point, well, so it started with, I said 19.
Right.
At that point, I had 80 in one class. So it was a ratio of 1 to 80. So it's a little difficult to control. And not only that, they're all over the place. And I decided that my method of control was very different than other people's method of control. My method was, you're going to be doing it. I'll give you the tools, and now you take over and do it. And so that's what enabled me to have all these students with just one teacher. And actually, the interesting thing is that freedom and responsibility is what attracted all those kids to my program.
Right.
Everybody really thought it was food, but really was freedom.
Oh, it's food too, right?
Well, food yeah, that's true. You did have the food when you came.
It was good. It was good pizza. So the media center opened.
Oh yeah. So then.
So here, let me show.
Fast forward 30 years, and the school district built this incredible building for me. 25,000 square foot media arts center, Palo Alto High School. It really is shocking. Like I said, I went from this trailer where actually the roof was leaking and a few other things like the air conditioning didn't work, into this thing which I would consider a palace. Right. And you can see all the different rooms. It's got room for every single program that I created over the years. And there's the atrium. The reason they made an atrium that is that big is because my classes generally ran 80 kids. And the question is, what are you going to do with 80 kids? Well, how about packing them into this atrium? And it turns out that the kids prefer they really like to be sandwiched together in smaller spaces. So now they're all in these, I have 3 other rooms, and they sort of spread out in those other rooms, although yesterday they were all in the atrium. We have a lot of flexibility. It's great.
And what has been your experience with this compared to being in those trailers that you had before? What's been your greatest highlight from this experience? And it's only been open since when?
About 8 months.
About 8 months.
Last August. Mm-hmm. So the greatest experience, it's just unbelievable how excited the students are. Mm-hmm. And one of the main problems that we have is get them to go home. Nobody wants to leave. Right. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon or 6. How many kids are still in the building? Can we ask them to go home? And they're working collaboratively, so they actually want to stay there. That's just one that you just had, that one computer lab.
Computer lab, right?
That's one of 3.
Right.
I used to have, back in the olden days, in that portable, I had a computer lab that I had to share with other people. Frequently, the computers didn't work, and not only that, I was supposed to be in that room and the computer lab, which was, of course, on the other side of campus at the same time.
Right. And all your furniture is all movable, so you can create collaborative spaces, and teams can set themselves up in different corners of the space.
You see those desks right there?
Yeah.
They move.
Right.
And so kids, I can say, get into a group, and they can all scoot into a group in a minute. So I don't believe in desks in rows.
Are they good for racing? Can you race?
Actually, they have had some races. We've had to control it a little bit.
Right.
But in general, we don't have rows. We have kids working collaboratively. That is a picture that was the grand opening for the building. Mm-hmm. It had 3 really amazing people, Ariana Huffington and David Kelly from the D School, and Shelby Coffey from the museum in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. They had an amazing panel. It was great, and I'm sorry, we didn't record it, unfortunately, and so anyway.
Right.
So,
okay. So let's talk a little bit about what you do in the Media Center, right? So in education, I think one of the reasons why you're highlighted in what you do is because you have this unique way of controlling your kids, which is not to control them, right? So talk a little bit about what you do. What is, we hear a lot in education, project-based learning, blended learning. What are these? What do these terminologies mean? How do you use this in the classroom?
So blended learning, I don't know how many of you know what blended learning is, but it really is an opportunity to give students more control of their learning. Mm-hmm. So a typical classroom, as a matter of fact, 80% of the classrooms today, the teacher still lectures 100% of the time. And so the question is, how effective is that? And the answer really, for the most part, is it's not very effective. People, they daydream, they do other things. It just doesn't really work. And people learn by doing. Tom Dewey said many, many years ago, 100 years ago to be exact, that people learn by doing, but unfortunately, education takes a long time to figure that out. And so what my students do, and what blended learning is 50% of the time they are working on something that's a project-based. Actually, in my classes, it's more than 50%, but for the rest of the nation, can they somehow give students some opportunity to control their learning? That's the key.
Right.
Because the question is, even just here, working at Google, how excited would you be about what you're doing if somebody told you what to do 100% of the time?
Right.
Nobody likes to be bossed around all the time. And that's what's happening, unfortunately, in a lot of schools.
And I think that one of the things that people get surprised, we talk about blended learning, we talk about project-based learning as having a product at the end of your experience. And I think a lot of times when we think about student projects, we think about like the volcano with tissue paper and or whatever, but your students are creating real stuff. So I want to highlight a couple of things, if you can talk about some of the things that your students are actually doing.
So, if you just think about the teenage years, kids want to be independent. Isn't that it? Number one, they want to be independent. As a matter of fact, if they see a parent coming, they usually cross the street. Right? I don't have any parents. I was born kind of under a rock or something.
Right.
And, that's typical. Most kids want to be independent. It's not, of course, that they don't love their parents. It's just that it's a time in life when they're seeking independence. So I try to build into that by giving them the independence to create these projects. And the projects are real. So this is the Campanile, was founded in 1918. It's a student newspaper at Palo Alto High School. And it runs 28 pages, 3 sections, comes out every 3 weeks. And it also has a website, and it also has a magazine that goes with it.
And they go through the same process that any news organization would go through: editorial board, editors,
everything. Not only that, they support it themselves. So one of the hardest things for them to do is to sell advertising. They are terrified. It's kind of interesting. It's very hard. But my idea is, I say to them, no more Girl Scout cookies. You're no longer these cute little things. You're going to have to give people value for whatever it is they're paying for. And so, and you also have to learn how to do this. This is an American society. And so they do it. So the whole thing, this is Verde magazine. I founded that in 2000. And this is C magazine. It comes out with the Campanile. So they copied it from the New York Times. Right. As a matter of fact, doesn't it look like the New York Times a little bit? Right. So, and it comes out every 3 weeks. It's 28 pages, full color, glossy.
Oops,
then
sorry.
Go back. Yeah. So that is, this is daily. We broadcast daily to the school. We have a closed circuit, but it's also online, so you can see it right away, and you can see the archives. The parents can see what they're doing. And this is, this was founded in 2007. The question was how to get all those guys that don't want to learn to write. Well, how are you going to get them to write? Well, the main thing they want to do is play sports, right? So the question is, what are they interested in? How about sports? Let them write about each other. And they loved it. And so it's a very popular program, and it's a great magazine and a website. This is The Voice. This is a website, comes out, it's daily, updated multiple times a day, and they write about whatever, again, that's important. So one of the things you want to do is give them the responsibility to know what it is that's important to write about. That is really hard for most teenagers. As a matter of fact, in the beginning journalism class, it takes me about 10 weeks to get them out of the mode of tell me what to do to get an A.
Right.
That's all they want to know. How do I get an A?
Right.
And it's a real problem because you want to hire people who are actually think for themselves, independent, feel good about it, willing to take a risk, and you don't get that if you sit in the classroom and told what to do all the time and worry about your grade.
Right, and I think it's important to highlight these because I think most people would agree. Seeing these, you would think that any professional publisher were producing these, when in fact it's your high school students that are doing this. And I think that disconnect between what is project-based learning and what really is project-based learning is highlighted and shown with the products that your kids are producing.
Right, they make a difference in their own community. For example, we have a program teacher advisor program where we got rid of the counseling system, and we have every teacher has like 60 students that they act as a counselor advisor to. That came about as a result of an article in the Campanile newspaper.
Right.
And so they know they're empowered. It makes a difference, and so they're really interested.
And you can't get rid of your students,
so this
can you?
is my class size, ratio 1 to 70.
Right.
And so the question is, do I control them? Well, the answer is they control each other and themselves based on the learning and based on the philosophy in the program.
Right.
And I don't have problems with kids cutting class. As I mentioned, my number one problem is can you please go home? And, you know, we're happy you're here.
but you want to go home.
Yeah, Mom and Dad miss
so,
you.
So you wrote a book. I don't know how you found the time to do this. I'm a little jealous and I'm curious. We'll have a more conversation about how you actually had the time to put all this together. But let's talk about this. Why did you write a book? What's the message in the book? What are you trying to get across with this book?
So I wrote this book because I'm trying to spread this idea of how you can do project-based learning that is not, as you say, you know, volcanoes and, I don't know, missions and things like that, you know, the mission project.
Right.
And because this is real world, this makes an impact. And so I wanted other kids around the country to have the same opportunity. Because, you know, our dropout rate in America today is about 40%. And these people then don't have skills. So how can you engage kids? They don't have to be like super smart, Palo Alto, you know, wealthy kids. They can be any kid. I think no matter what your income level is, you want to be trusted, you want to be respected, and you want to be given some freedom. And so that's the goal.
All right. So before we get into some of the meat of the book itself, let's talk a little bit about who wrote your foreword and how that came about. So, so talk a little bit about this.
So this is my foreword. It's written by James Franco, is the actor. And the reason he wrote the foreword is he was my student for 3 years. He was in this program. His high school was typical of most students' high school experiences, you know, a little up and down and, you know. And he bonded with the program and with me. And he said that it was the only place where he really learned how important it was to have a real world experience. He wrote, and his articles, he got feedback on his articles. He was kind of shocked that anybody read them and that he wasn't just writing for some teacher who would then throw his paper into some circular file. He was writing for the real world, and it made a huge impact on his life. So he has written the foreword. He came back for the grand opening, and I invited some people to come. And turns out 700 people came to see him. It's a little more than I expected. And he was nice enough to do a selfie with every single person. I couldn't believe it. At the end of that, I thought he was going to faint or something.
Right.
But he is, and he also made, he drew or painted, I don't know if you know, he's an artist. He painted all these gigantic paintings for the building. So if you come ever, you're all welcome, by the way. You'll see paintings by James Franco, and he did a great job.
And he keeps coming back, right? There's a bunch of art pieces that are in the media set. Like you need a bigger build a bigger building just to keep his artwork. That's
well,
right?
Yes, but he is coming back often, and actually he's planning to come back more often in the fall for a special program that will be announced at a later point.
Right.
But I think, you know, I'm hats off to him for spending time, you know, and doing this for the Palo
and also
Alto
highlighting, you know, the fact that project-based learning had a huge impact on his life in terms of being able to see the process of being able to get feedback and collaborate with folks and create something. I think that had a huge impact on him.
Huge. And then also the other thing that he writes about in this foreword is how he's now teaching a lot at UCLA and another, I think it's NYU, and he uses this exact model in his own teaching. So that's a part of why he wrote the foreword.
Okay, so let's talk about the meat of the book. I think I have some slides. Oh, sorry, I was going to show you the moonshot slide here so that you love so much. This is you standing there, right?
No, this is this is a statue, fortunately donated by my daughter Anne. Right. And yeah, it arrived the other day. Literally, it's only a week there, and boy, it's become #1 place to visit.
Right.
And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what she was doing with that statue and how I got it. But,
where she get the things you can find on eBay,
things,
huh?
Well, I have a feeling that she had some kind of a party, and now I've got the statue. Not sure. But anyway, my students think it's great, and everybody's taking their picture with the statue, so whatever, it's great.
All right, okay. So one of the big themes in the book and what you're trying to get across here is about control.
Right.
And you highlight, and I can show you some highlights here about giving students some control of their learning. Talk a little bit about what that means. You highlighted that a lot in the book. What does that mean?
So giving students some control of their learning. So I think it's really difficult for teachers to give students control, because you come out of a school of education, and what happens is you've got this book. I'm not kidding. They give you a book, how to maintain control in your classroom. Discipline, how to maintain, how to achieve this.
Well, I was going to show
there it
there's
is.
some slides.
Those are just 2 examples. But then show the next slide. Just put this on. That's just one of 150 million responses you can get if you type in control of your classroom.
Right.
Teachers are obsessed with keeping control. As a matter of fact, they're evaluated on the kind of control they have in the class. So somebody comes in the class and they expect everybody to be sitting there quietly interacting with a book or with a piece of paper and listening to the oracle speak, the teacher, right? And so if you want to have project-based learning, and if you want to give some students some control, it looks very different. It looks messy. Mm-hmm. People are talking to each other. Just like you saw those chairs I have, they're all in groups. They're not all lined up in a row. It's not all symmetrical.
Right. I would say that if before the Media Center, when somebody would want to go visit you, unlike a typical classroom where you knew exactly where the teacher was, it took like 15 minutes to find you, because you were, you were somewhere in the back working with some team. Nobody could find you at any point because it looked like it was chaotic.
It looks chaotic. But some people ask, so how are these kids doing? Was their publication good, or how does it rank? Mm-hmm. So just so you know, we have won consistently for several years in a row the Gold Crown from Columbia. So it's the top of the nation. So it's not like you're giving kids control and all of a sudden they start producing low quality stuff. It's just the opposite. You give them some control and then they feel passionate about what they're doing, and then they want to make it the best. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really true. And finding me in the classroom, that's right. It was hard to find me in the classroom. So I was certified as something called National Board Teacher, National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. And they require you to have a video of yourself. Here's another problem, teaching. And so you have to stand up and lecture, and then they evaluate you, and then they either certify you or don't. And that was the biggest hang-up for me. I had to organize a special day when I could make them all sit there, and I could lecture, and they could all sit quietly.
You were pretending like you were in a class.
I was pretending like this was my class.
Right.
So you see, it's embedded. It's all over society. And so if we can somehow get this idea across that giving people more freedom to learn, even if they're in bodies that are younger than 18, will make a big difference in their learning.
Right. So I want to ask you a question, and as I do that, I'm going to open it up for questions. So if you have questions to ask Esther, there's a microphone up there. So think about your questions as I ask you this, and then we'll have some dialogue with the audience because they're
great.
here.
That's great.
If you're talking to a new teacher, or if you're talking to a teacher who's been a teacher for 5 years, it doesn't really matter. What is the moonshot? What do you want them to think about? What you want them to read your book, and you want them to think about very specific things that they can do in their classroom. What's the big takeaway from it?
So the big takeaway is, like, for example, hopefully they'll get Chromebooks. We just got Chromebooks for the school. Mm-hmm. The first thing you want to do is give them the Chromebook and teach them how to search. And search, where's Dan Russell?
Where's Dan? There he is.
Dan. Yes, thank you, Dan. Because this is the first thing that they need to know how to do. Right. And then after that, you give them an assignment to do, for example. Mm-hmm. And literally anything, including math, science. It's the entire curriculum. and you open it up. Instead of you lecturing, like for example, even on Romeo and Juliet, what's the story behind Romeo and Juliet? Well, how about you guys go online, take a look at what the resources are. What is the story of Romeo and Juliet? You have 10 minutes to find out, and then I want you to talk to each other in a group. What is the story? How did that come about? I'll tell you, they're going to learn more in that 10 minutes than they would if I spoke for 10 minutes and told them the story. They will not remember anything I said. They're probably dreaming about what they could do as soon as they get out of school. So that's part of, I think, what's going on and what they should be doing. Okay. And I think one of the things that Google could do that would be helpful, since all these publications I do, by the way, they're all done on docs. My hat off to the docs team. I couldn't do any of this stuff without the collaboration. They all peer edit everything. That's the way it works. And so one of the things that would be great is if somehow we could get that message across, that it's easier for the teacher to teach and more effective for the students to learn if they would just relinquish some control. And as I said, if the blended learning model could be more effective nationwide, we might not have that 40% dropout rate. We'd have more kids that were engaged.
All right. Okay. Questions? What do we have? We have Esther here. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Thanks for coming. I've really enjoyed the talk. You mentioned that you believe that the blended learning model can work in all socioeconomic situations. Do you have any examples of maybe where blended learning has been applied in the lower socioeconomic kind of neighborhoods or demographic and the success rates?
You know, I didn't personally teach in any of those areas, although I can say that last year I volunteered to teach the lowest lane at Palo Alto High School, the majority of students coming from East Palo Alto. And it worked with them too. And I was teaching English in that program.
I can add the methodology is being used by schools all over the world, all over the country. There's a school in Philadelphia called, there's a school here in California, High Tech High, that uses project-based learning, and the zip codes that kids come from are all over the place in Southern California. There's a school in Philadelphia called the Science Leadership Academy. Same thing, it's an inquiry-based high school. It's all project-based learning that they're doing. So the model applies even more so, I think, sometimes in poorer socioeconomic background schools because you're putting kids together that have diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives, and they're creating some unusual and cool things. And so you're seeing a lot of cool things come from that in those schools.
Yeah, I think it does work really well. Those kids are so used to being told what to do all the time and being bossed around. And so their idea of using tech in the classroom is to have a worksheet online. And so you'll see kids with those computers and that you think they're doing something creative. Well, think again. They are not. They're just doing that same thing online, worksheet.
Let me ask you about, did that answer your question?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me ask you about professional development for teachers. What do you like about professional development? I almost didn't want to ask that. What would you change about professional development for teachers? What's wrong in that setup system?
Is there anybody in here that's been a teacher? So do you remember what professional development is like? So they bring in some high-paid guy to speak to you at the beginning of whatever day it is, and they speak. It's a lecture-based model. And then they ask you afterward to get together in little groups and tell you what you thought of that guy that spoke. I would change that whole thing. I mean, I would have people actually doing exactly what we recommend in the classroom. Teachers should do the same thing. Put themselves together in groups, talk about issues in their classroom, find solutions, and then share. You know, it's kind of like the unconference model. You know, you know.
It's the unconference model where it's self-driven and the participants are actually driving the conversation as opposed to being lectured to by someone who comes in. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think lecture-based works to a certain extent. That's why I said the blended learning. 50%, okay, you can lecture for 50%. But then after that, you need to stop.
What skills are needed
for
that? What skills do teachers need to be able to implement this model that they don't necessarily have now, or they're not necessarily utilizing now?
I think the main thing is they have to let go of their fear of giving students some control. I mean, it looks messy. It really does. You know, kids will be talking to each other. They might not turn their stuff in on time. But you know, after a short period of that, you're still collecting work. You know, whether I collect all the stuff online, and then it's all corrected online. But if you want, you can collect it in hard copy, or you can get other kids. You know, you're still doing the same thing. The only difference is that you're giving them more control. You're not dictating to such a degree, and I think that as I mentioned, you know, the main thing that teachers are afraid of is losing control, because that's what you're trained to do in a school of education, and that's what your principal comes through. You know, they have this thing called scripted teaching. Are you familiar with scripted teaching? Anyone know about it? It's right here in Santa Clara County. Scripted teaching is basically they give you a textbook, they give you exactly what you're supposed to say, and tell you where you're supposed to be on every single day of the school year. And they give you the test too. It's happening right now, right here, as we speak. Yeah. And so the question is, like, how effective is that? And I would say it's not very effective. Doesn't seem, you know, we have 600,000 jobs that go unfilled. Did you know that? And the reason they go unfilled is because they can't find people with the right skills to fill those jobs. We're training for a factory model. And of course, you know, and then as I mentioned, in schools like in Oakland, you know, Oakland's dropout rate is 70%. I don't know. Did you guys know that? Isn't that something scary, I think? San Jose actually has a pretty high dropout rate as well.
So we had some people line up for questions, and I have some others, but I'll start up here.
So can you talk a little about blended learning for younger age groups?
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So, you know, even little kids, small kids, preschool kids, even they like to work together with their friends. They're all coming to school to see their friends. You know, if anybody's a teacher in here, I don't want to disappoint you. They're not coming to see you. And the same thing happens in elementary school. So you want to give kids an opportunity to work in a peer group. You can be more directive, that's why I say even 50%, but you can do the same thing. You know, then kids get excited about that. It works in elementary school as well. There are some subjects where I think it's a little bit harder to do it than in other subjects. Like, for example, perhaps science, chemistry. You might want, chemistry is so much memorization and so forth. So, but you can still have kids doing a project based on that. You know, it's a lab science.
I think the main point here, and you and I have talked about this in the past, is that school is set up as an individual sport, but we live in a team-based world, right? And so we take kids through this individual experience, even young kids, and then we push them out their door and we say, okay, go work with others, good luck, right? And we're not teaching them that skill set. And project-based learning, besides what they're producing, is helping them create that collaborative mindset that we need in the work world, because we don't work in a factory where one person's doing one thing. We're working in an environment where it's knowledge-based, network-based, where we need people to collaborate more. And in your program, kids are learning that more so than creating a newspaper. They're learning how to work with each other and how to build off each other's strengths and those types of things as well.
I think a lot of elementary schools are already doing a lot of this. They're more into project-based learning than the high schools are. I think the problem comes in middle school and high school, where they start to really lecture full time, and especially those AP classes, AP US History, 90 minutes of lecture all the time, constant.
For all those AP history jobs, right?
Yeah, for all those AP history jobs, yes.
I imagine student motivation has a big effect on blended learning, and I was wondering if you could talk about motivation and whether all students react the same way and whether that affects performance, and would you teach people that are highly motivated or less motivated the same way?
It turns out that this blended learning motivates kids. And so I get kids that are not at all motivated. I mean, James Franco was one of them. And this can change the way that their life.
Because it helps them build autonomy, right?
It helps them build autonomy, and also they become friends with the other kids in the class. It's a big community, in essence. It ends up being an intellectual team. There are now about 600 kids taking media arts studies at Palo Alto High School. You can imagine the size of that team. It's huge. And they all feel connected. It makes a huge difference to their to how they feel about themselves and how they feel about being there at Palo Alto High School.
Right. Yes, sir.
So as someone who lives with a teacher, I get to hear all the complaints about the backwardness of professional development and the factory model all the time. How would you suggest a teacher going about to create the changes that you've been able to create in their own schools? Do they get lucky with 7 computers, or are there active steps they can take to help get the administration on their side?
Well, locally, I can tell you there's going to be a film on the 28th of April, and it's just coming out, and it won Sundance Film Festival called I think it's called How We Succeed. We can't show any films here, but I'd be happy to send a link to that. It's free. I would advise...
Is this most likely to succeed?
Oh, it is most likely to succeed.
Larry Rosenstock at High Tech High?
That's right.
Right, okay.
Most likely
to succeed, yes.
Right. And I think I'm trying to arrange most faculties around here to see that film. They need to see it. The administration needs to see it. Teachers need to see it. It shows you how to get it going, because a single teacher in a school by yourself, it's a real battle. I mean, I had a battle for years because I started doing this when nobody else was doing it, and people thought I was wacky. You know, I guess the only ones that didn't think I was wacky were all the parents and all the students, because the program kept growing, and they were like, "What is she doing in there? You know, my God, they all look like they're not doing anything. They're just talking." But I think it's tough for and I hear your wife, you know, and her problems. The PD is very difficult, professional development, because it is mind-numbing.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about, or let me ask you a question. What you just mentioned about the movie Most Likely to Succeed. It actually highlights. I saw the movie.
Larry Rosenstock and
runs
High Tech
High. It highlights project-based learning as a model, and it clearly points out that you're not covering all the material, but you're teaching kids a whole bunch of new ways to learn. One of the issues that you get against project-based learning, or one of the naysayers, if you will, against project-based learning is we need to teach to the test, right? Assessments. Talk a little bit about assessments and the negative impact that potentially assessments have, not to lead the witness.
Okay, Jamie.
But also, like, how do you get around that idea of you have to teach to the test and you can't do project-based learning?
Well, I still think you're teaching. That's the 50%.
Right.
You know, you're still doing it. The only thing is the teaching is sticking. That's the difference.
Right.
So kids have a reason why they're learning all this stuff, as opposed to just memorizing it so they can take a test. So these kids in this program, in the media arts program, they all score at the top. I mean, Palo Alto High School, and a lot of the kids coming out of this program are national merit scholars. So most schools are happy when they have one. I think we have 50. And it all comes because it matters to them. You know, it's just like a foreign language. You know, you learn something, you French or Spanish or whatever, and then you don't practice it, and then where does it go? When you go to France, you can't remember anything. So, I mean, this gives them an opportunity to practice every day. So even if schools want to have a 6-period day where there's all lecture, if they could just give them the 7th period to have it for project-based learning, that is meaningful, it might make those other 6 periods tolerable. So, you know, I'm trying to think of all these different methods to get people to do it. And
Right.
That's the purpose of the book.
I was going to say that they're all in the book, right?
That's all in the book. So the first part of the book is the introduction, of course, by James Franco, and then there's some philosophy on like, why do it? Why should you do it? And then followed by chapters on apps. Which apps can you use in every single subject area? Followed by networks for teachers. How can you personally get support if you need support? There's networks, and then the last part of it is the history of technology in America. Like, what has happened since we started with technology? What's happened? What are the statistics? How does it work? And so that's sort of how to get it spread everywhere. Fortunately, the book has done pretty well. So it's all over. It's sold out actually at Kepler's and Books Incorporated, and we're almost ready for the second printing on this.
Right.
But
if there was only another way to get a copy of a book into some kind of format.
So look at this was published by Pacific Research Institute. They're a wonderful group in San Francisco. It's a think tank. And they normally don't really publish books. They publish important papers and things from scholars and things like that. They're a little shocked, to be honest, that this book has already sold out, and they're not quite sure what to do. But so they are planning on doing a Kindle edition. They have never done a Kindle edition for any book yet. And so this is the first. But they promised me it's coming. So yes, Jamie, it's coming.
I just been giving her. All right. So Tracy.
So Palo Alto has seen a rash of some mental health challenges, and
Yes.
I imagine that in your world in particular, as sort of the voice of the school, that you've seen a lot of how the students are responding to that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on both that, but how you feel like project-based learning and blended learning has impacted the social emotional health of the kids as well.
That's a great question. So for those of you that aren't aware, so Palo Alto schools, especially Gunn High School, has had a rash of suicides. And these are high-achieving students, apparently did not have a lot of the factors that people would suspect them to be suicidal, that have committed suicide. So we've had 3 in the last 4 months. And it's been pretty bad, to be honest. And I personally think that the kids that were, the factors that affected those kids were expectations that are kind of embedded from the parents or maybe the grandparents, and that the kids then embed those. That just becomes part of their nature, and they feel that if they don't meet those expectations, that they're humiliated. And there's nothing worse than humiliation, and especially if you personally feel that way. And so the philosophy of my program is that you work until you get it right. So I don't actually even grade until you get an A. Kids will revise things over and over and over. I have a mastery-based system. So you can revise, you come into the program, you don't know how to write, so then you revise that essay or that article, 10 times. And in between each revision, there is no grade. You only get the grade at the end. And so I think kids need to be given a freedom like that to fail. But what happens in a lot of the programs is that, you get a grade, and then they average that grade with the other grade, and they average the other one. At the end, you can get 89.4, and you get a B or B+. And then, your parents get mad and whatever. So I think there needs to be less emphasis on grades, more emphasis on it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to be a kid. Let's get rid of all this high pressure stuff and make them feel like it's okay. So I know Gunn High School now is thinking about moving to what is called the block schedule. So Pali has the block schedule. We have 3, instead of having every period on every day, all 7 periods, we go period, that's 2, 4, 6 on one day, 1, 3, 5, 7 on another day. And then one day a week, we have all periods. And it's interesting, the kids are now complaining that the 1 day a week for all periods is too stressful. And it might be, because the pressures are so high to get into college. Also, one other thing I wanted to mention is that they all want to go to Harvard, right? Princeton. It's ridiculous. So I've been giving them stories. I just brought in Mike Honda, Congressman Mike Honda. Do you know who he is? He's a local congressman. He did really poorly in high school. He actually dropped out of college. In general, he was not academic, and then he did super well. And now he's been a congressman for I don't know how many years, 20 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. But it's just to give them some perspective. You don't have to go to Harvard. You can go to Foothill College. You can go to any school, or you don't even have to go to school maybe. If you want to do something else, you need to think about what you want to do. So more teachers have to say that, because you know how they don't listen to their parents when they're teenagers.
Right.
I'm sorry to shock you. But anyway.
But it's all part of this whole, we talked a little bit about earlier, this idea that it's an individual's sport, right? And not only that, we make them compete against each other, right? So they're competing for grades, and sometimes instead of figuring out how to collaborate, they're competing, and that causes issues.
That causes issues, especially if teacher grades on without a curve. You're just grading on an absolute scale,
right.
And a certain number of kids get an A and then another B, and then they talk about grade inflation,
right.
And then kids are checking their phone. I'm not kidding. They check their phone every 20 minutes. And it's ridiculous. I don't post grades. It's like, finished, sorry you guys. Right. You just learn, and then when you're done doing that learning, you can get an A. Right. And then they're actually very happy about this, to be honest.
Right.
No
Well,
stress.
it's constant iteration versus some having some absolute time where you get a B. Like, what does a B mean, right? Like, what do you do with a B versus continuously learning to iterate?
Right. I think more programs need to be like that. I think that Gunn High School could benefit.
Well, most high schools can benefit.
Right. Most high schools can benefit, not just Gunn.
Okay, well, first I want to thank you for what you were just saying about stress on the kids. I have teenagers applying to college right now. But my question is actually about how do you apply some of this to in a state like my home state of New Mexico, where the poverty is so great. The biggest barrier to learning a lot of these kids face is just basic hunger, and the teachers are bringing in food to feed the students so they can learn. That kind of stuff. How do you apply the project-based learning to a school that can't afford any technology whatsoever and can't even afford to get the heat working?
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
You take it. I'm not taking it.
Tough one. So
this is your show, not mine.
Oh yeah, thanks, Judy. My very first teaching job, I had a class full of boys, period 1 in the morning, and that was their number one problem. They were hungry. And it was in San Leandro. And it's a major problem. It's too bad that somebody in the community has to solve the problem. I solved the problem by bringing in food every day.
Right.
And then all the administration wanted to know what I had done to make these boys learn. And it was just so simple, just food in the morning. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to learn when you're hungry. Mm-hmm. And it's also hard to learn when you don't have a place to live. We have a lot of homeless kids in America.
Right. Well, let's make sure that we're clear here that blended learning or project-based learning is like one component, a giant scope of things that we have to do in education, right? In terms of a learning model. But you asked a great question, which I'll kind of create more of a general question around this, which is, the use of technology in education, right? We're seeing an increase of the use of technology in education. Some schools can afford it, some schools can't afford it, but more importantly, you did not take technology and just put it on top of old learning models and
right.
do that. You actually embedded and integrated the technology in education. So a lot of times we see technology as this nice to have because we're adding it on top of things, versus being a core enabling capability to new learning models that get you to that motivation that you want from kids. So
right.
Talk about the role of technology in education and what you're seeing, good and also bad.
Well, so good is when it's embedded in a way that it supports the learning. Mm-hmm. It's bad when it just continues to reinforce worksheets. Mm-hmm. And when kids are just put on a computer nonstop for I'm not kidding, long periods of time. It can be for hours.
Right, drill and kill.
Drill and kill. That is not a good model. And I don't know if you know, but in Florida, they have had some problems with the tech-based schools because the kids were just put on computer all day and then they didn't learn anything.
Right.
And that's one of the other problems with MOOCs. MOOCs, massive open online courses. People don't like to learn alone. Nobody wants to learn alone. Their dropout rate is 95%. So if you put it in a classroom where then kids are talking and interacting with each other, then they want to stay. So my question on those is, can you do it online as opposed to in person?
Right.
But
the key message is that we have to figure out ways to take technology and support and enable these great learning models that are being created that you champion and are part of.
That's what teachers need to learn in their professional development, how to take technology and use it to support their teaching, not in place, and just to make a huge difference to get kids excited.
Right.
I think it needs, it makes a huge difference for America.
Right. So we got two more folks here. Let's make sure. I want to get everybody's questions in before we run out of time. So come up, ask your question.
All right, quickly. I'm curious about your experience with how much guidance to give the groups of kids when they break out into like their own independent assignments. Is it, do you just, give them a task and let them completely self-organize? Or do you come in after a few minutes and, give some guidance? I know from my team working at Google, many times we're challenged on how to collaborate together with our peers.
It's a good question. So what I do, first I just let them pick their own partners, by the way. Some teachers tell you who to be with, and then they don't want to do that. So you pick your own partners, but then you have your project, and then I come around usually and I was like, so what do you guys decided to do? And can you explain to me why is this a good idea? And I don't just leave them. The infrastructure is there. It's just that I give them more responsibility. And
you let them make decisions as well, right? You and I have talked about there's been controversial articles that the students wanted to write about, and you guide them, but you don't tell them, what to do or how to position something. You give them the framework to do that.
100%.
Right.
If they'd be here, they would tell you themselves that they feel so empowered that they tell me they're in charge of the whole class, everything, because they feel that way. But in fact, I meet with them all the time and give them suggestions. So every day after school, or maybe at lunchtime or something like that, email but I'm not the parent, see, so they're not threatened by, and also I make them as suggestions. I don't say you have to do this.
Right.
That is really the key.
Right.
And so with groups here at Google, I would go around and talk to them also. One thing that's great about Google, great people. I don't think I've met a single person at Google that I wasn't impressed with. Guys are all amazing. So I'm sure that,
We're doing okay.
Yeah, you seem to be doing just fantastically.
We're going to wrap it up in a minute. And so think about how you want to close this out. Another question. Yeah,
Okay.
We're talking about the guy behind you. Okay.
At least I'll be quick with my question. Could you comment on if there are other parts of the world that are already embracing this type of learning? And second, about higher education, is this applicable to that also?
Oh my God,
Those are good
higher
questions.
education. They should be doing this now.
We failed on that one. Huh?
Oh my God. I'm targeting K-12, but universities, why aren't they doing this now? Actually, Stanford is working on it. I've been working with some people at Stanford, but all universities should be doing this.
Right.
It's hard to
So
believe.
any other
But
places in the
anyway,
world
let me
that
just,
you
other
visit? Lots of
places.
places.
So Mexico, they ordered hundreds of these books. So I'm meeting with the Mexican education minister in the end of April. And I don't, they want to translate it to Spanish, which I think is terrific, but right now they're ordering them all in English. And I hope all those teachers can read them.
Well, and also, I don't know where the person who asked questions, in some cases, you look at a country like India, for example, Well, even if they had all the resources in the world to build all the schools that they wanted, they'd still be short anywhere between 500 and 700,000 teachers that they need to fill those classrooms. So in some cases, they have to come up with some new model to teach, because the 1 to 30 model isn't going to work in a place like that.
So also, actually, I should just tell you other countries that have come through. So Indonesia was just visiting. France, there have been a lot of people from France. Switzerland is interested. I'm going to be this keynote speaker at some digital conference in Zurich. Germany, there are a lot of interest in. So all over the world, there's a lot of interest in all of this that's going on.
Right.
And people are trying to do it. I think they might have harder times in some places of the world than here, because the education's more rigid than it is here. And I've also been invited to Korea, and I think that would be a really interesting.
That's an interesting experience.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right.
Everybody
So
studies.
everything in my body tells me not to do this, but go ahead, James. Your last question. You got the last question.
I have a fun final question. If Susan, Janet, and Ann were going to school today, how would you approach parenting any differently than you did back when they went to school for the first time?
My God, what a bonus question that one is. What would I do?
You're supposed to say, I wouldn't do anything different. I did everything perfectly.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. So a lot of people ask me, would I control their time with technology? I think I probably would do some control, and I would control what they are doing online, as opposed to, I wouldn't let them just do anything online. I would do that. People also ask me, what did I do to make them so independent? Boy, they are really independent.
Right.
And I think the main thing I did is, I didn't have any help when they were small. It was just like me and the 3 kids, and my husband is a high-energy physicist, professor of physics, and his main interest in life is particles. Right. And so he spent a lot of time thinking about those. And so I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So what I did is like, okay, you guys, you can walk and you can talk a little. You're going to be on the team. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff early. Right. And so that's exactly right. They all had responsibilities, a lot of them early. And I think that made a difference. Right. Poor Susan was responsible for taking care of Janet when she was 2. Right. It wasn't really, I didn't leave her alone in the house, but,
right.
She had to entertain
her.
She had a role.
Right.
She had a role. Right. So I think that continued, all through school.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so hopefully we can give Esther a round of applause. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us.